Hello and welcome to today's webinar. So today, of course, is a follow-up from last week's webinar, where we had Suzi Carter with us. I think Suzi's there. Hi, Suzi. How you doing?
I am. Yeah. Can you not see me? I think my video is just going a bit weird.
Can now. Yeah. Well, you've gone now, but you're back again.
Okay.
There we go. Brilliant.
Good. Okay.
So of course, last week we had Suzi on talking about commercial conversions. I've just realised my holding slide has not been updated. I've got HMO deals on there. We're not talking HMO deals. We're talking commercial conversions today, of course. So hopefully that's not thrown anybody thinking you're in the wrong place. We're talking commercial conversions. Today is the commercial conversions clinic. Obviously, Suzi is a surveyor, so was a surveyor with the likes of B&Q and Kingfisher and CBRE and Land Security and people like that. So lots of experience in the commercial world, turned developer, and now mentors and coaches property people too. So welcome, Suzi. Let's just bring
thanks,
your
Paul. Good to be here.
Absolutely fabulous. So what we're going to do today is sort of talk commercial conversions. And what we thought we would do, obviously, this being the clinic, is ask the audience to tell us some of the areas they'd like us to search or particular properties they'd like us to search. But before we start off and do that, what I was going to do is just do a sort of a brief overview of one of the deals that we did as we kind of went into a sort of similar time, actually, from back in sort of 2008. We did a few commercial conversions around that sort of time. And what I wanted to do was to just kind of plant the seeds around which kind of areas we might want to kind of do this in and what kind of buildings we might want to look at. And then just try to bring ourselves forward as to some of the tools we might be able to use within Nimbus before we then start applying those to some of the deals and things you could be looking at yourselves. And we'll get Suzi kind of helping us with that as well. So just in readiness for that, if you could have a look on your Zoom control panels, what you should see is a little raise hand button. And what I'd like you to do sort of when you're ready is to raise your hand if you've got a particular site you'd like us to look at. If you can raise your hand on there, we'll then start doing that for you. We'll get you up and we'll ask you to introduce the site, and we'll sort of find it on Nimbus and we'll start talking that through if that's okay. It's on the raise hand button there. So we've got Nigel's raise a hand, and we've got sort of one or two others hopefully that will come forward as well on the back of that. But first off, what I wanted to do is just to show you a deal that we did and kind of perhaps just talk to you about kind of why we decided that this was the right building for us. And the property that we did was a property at 39 Warwick Street in Leamington Spa. So what I'm doing here is I'm just typing into the sort of top part of Nimbus here, the address that's that we've got in effect. So you could be sort of thinking in your own head, I've got a set of particulars through for 39 Warwick Street in Leamington Spa, and be thinking about how we might be able to use Nimbus. So this is the little scheme that we did. We bought this little property here at the back. There was a little coach house at the back, and we converted this into what was sort of a sort of old school shop uppers, if you like. So the property that we did was this one here. I'm going to jump back in time, sort of show you that property sort of as it looked when we bought it in effect. So I'm just going to jump onto Street View. There you go. That's the cracker that we bought just there. Look, so in effect we bought this property here. There was a piece of land at the back with a little kind of coach house at the back. And what we liked about it was when we bought it, we'd got some low value space upstairs. It was a single retail unit with 3 stories of kind of storage space above it. And essence, what we did is we converted the upper parts here into a 9-bed HMO at the time, and then we built a little coach house we converted into a 7-bed on the ground floor and a 5-bed HMO at the back. We carved the little shop off at the front, and then we relet that. And you can sort of see, if I jump forward a little while, you'll sort of see the property having been refurbished, new windows and that kind of stuff off the back of that. Now, the reason that we did that particular scheme, I did a webinar kind of as we went into kind of lockdown, sort of looking at this kind of recession that was coming, or kind of we thought there was kind of this real uncertainty in the marketplace about what to do and what to buy and how to kind of go forward. And that kind of really kind of struck a chord with me at the time, because when we bought this particular building, it was back in 2008. There was Lehman Brothers just gone bust in America. That had meant kind of cascading effect sort of through the property sort of market, through the economy globally, and this kind of global recession that kind of happened. And the reason that we felt comfortable buying this particular building at the time was that we felt there were multiple exits for that particular property. And I want to just kind of bring sort of some of that to the forefront now to kind of explain kind of why we knew that at the time. And then they're going to apply this to some of your stuff going forward too. So if I just kind of zoom out a second, the first thing was that we'd got some local knowledge. So we kind of lived nearby, we invested nearby, we had a load of stuff sort of around this particular town, and over the sort of the time we've been investing, and the stuff we knew were things like we knew it was a reasonable marketplace for residential. So if I just kind of go into here on Nimbus, we have these little overlays, and these overlays here show me the average residential values across those areas. So what we knew about sort of central Leamington was there's some reasonable residential property, reasonable residential values there, and that sort of the part of Leamington that we were in, it was a good area. What we can see here is a kind of heat map, and you can sort of see average sales prices across the area of £300 a foot. That's a bit higher than across into Warwick over here. So Warwick and Leamington are almost kind of the same conurbation in many ways. But you can sort of see that when you go into Warwick, sort of parts of Warwick are sort of below £300 a foot. Sort of the main parts of Warwick here are 300, and then sort of a patch that's slightly better is sort of 330 a foot. As you come towards Leamington and sort of central Leamington, that goes to sort of 350. So we sort of knew these things. We thought there's a reasonable residential value in that area. So if we're buying cheap space above a shop, that actually 350 a foot should be strong enough to convert that. And actually, sort of new build sales prices usually about 20% above average sales prices. So sort of 420 a foot in today's world should be kind of reasonably achievable in those locations in effect. So we knew that at the time. We also knew that there was some reasonable residential yields to be had as well. So actually there's kind of perhaps a letting piece we could do. If we build some flats above this particular unit or some flats at the back, then of course we've got some reasonable yields that we could drive out the back of that. And what this is showing us here is that actually, you know, some of the flats here, so the 1-bed flats get the best part of a 6% yield off the back of that. And actually perhaps even a 3-bed house might get me a sort of a 4% yield as well. So we kind of knew sort of, you know, 1 and 2 bedroom flats, and perhaps a 3-bed house might kind of be interesting in that area too. So we kind of knew all that, but the bit that we were kind of most interested in was the fact that rather than, and because of the kind of building we were buying, it's a very sort of tall, narrow building that was kind of not particularly deep at the back. So what we were kind of interested in is, well, could we break the units up upstairs into individual letting rooms and let it as an HMO? And we had a little bit of knowledge about the local marketplace, because if we sort of zoom out a little bit further, what we'll see is that this is Warwick and Leamington, and of course, University of Warwick is just up here. And actually what we knew because we were from around here, is that the university students from the University of Warwick wanted to live in Leamington Spa. So we kind of knew, well, actually, if we're right in the centre of Leamington, then maybe there's a marketplace for HMOs and we can go and let to the university. What was kind of interesting is actually we've done some other schemes around the area too that meant we knew that. But of course, what we have on Nimbus now is this little HMO button, and what that shows us is where all the HMOs are across Leamington in effect. So you sort of see all across here, there's all these HMOs all around here, and this sort of stuff. It's kind of loads of them all over the place in effect. And as we kind of go further down, we sort of see there's even more sort of further down south as well. So what we knew was that actually, if we were to convert that property into an HMO, and what you can see is we've done that. There's kind of little 2 spots. One behind the little L, if you sort of zoom a bit further, you might see that little L underneath there. We knew that the HMO marketplace was there for us to go and convert that building into it, and that's kind of what we knew, frankly. So if we bought this building, we could convert it into flats, we could convert it into HMOs, and we could sell either of those quite comfortably. We bought it on the back of there being a very small building at the back, and actually what we probably see is this bigger lump at the back. Now, if I just switch across onto the OS master, you can sort of see the size. When we bought it, it was kind of this little piece like this in effect. So we put all this big extension on the back in effect to give ourselves extra floor space. Interestingly, when we did this particular scheme, these 2 HMOs or these 3 HMOs weren't there at all. Actually, what they'd done is they'd seen what we did and then kind of copied that as the model for that kind of building in an area. That actually kind of gave birth to the 6th way of finding land with Elite, which is kind of looking at what others are doing in an area and then sort of matching that yourself in effect. And that's kind of using the planning information we have here at Nimbus to go and make all that a thing. So the reason we bought that building, quite frankly, was that it had a low density site on the back of it. We knew that there was a marketplace for HMOs. We knew there's a reasonable residential values in the area. And what I suppose is kind of interesting is when you start applying that same principle and start looking at perhaps some of the other buildings up and down the street, you start saying, well, actually, is there an opportunity behind some of those? And this then is this little Ordnance Survey master map overlay that we use, which kind of becomes interesting when you start to look along the street. And we use this a lot for residential site finding. How do I find corner plots, back gardens, side gardens? I tend to use this overlay because what it shows you is kind of how does the built environment kind of sit relative to its neighbours? How does that, what kind of density can a site take in effect? And that's what this kind of shows us here. You know, you've got this sort of lump at the back of these. So, you know, could you put something in the back there? And again, sort of built space around the back. So that's kind of what it's showing us, is kind of where do we see, I guess, even those kind of low density sites where there's kind of these bits and pieces of land that we can kind of infill opportunities and sort of drive more into that space. I guess even kind of down here on this sort of car park down the back, this building's kind of got this big lump at the back of it. Of course, this one hasn't. So this is something we could do with that, of course. So hopefully all of that kind of makes sense. And I suppose what was very interesting with that was that when we bought this particular building, when we looked at the rate assessment for that particular property, what we could see is that at first floor, there was a rates assessment for the storage space upstairs. So in effect, ground floor was retail, first and second floor space was then kind of was ancillary space. That was kind of, they've got some cages upstairs to sell sell with the dogs and this sort of stuff. And kind of always worried when we were doing the conversion, we might kind of open a cupboard somewhere and it'll tarantula fall out, something like that. It's kind of one of those sort of scary things that we were kind of worried about at the time. But in essence, what we knew was that if we bought something based off a rental level about £5 a foot, we were probably paying £75 a foot for it. We could convert it for 100 quid, so we were in for 175. And then we knew there was that sort of £400 a foot exit value of that area in effect. So that's all fine. And I suppose what that means is, kind of this one's been and gone, thanks very much. Albeit I say that, I've run this, one of the other examples I was going to talk about was a property we did in Warwick, where actually the data sets were telling us we got our scheme may have moved on from the one we did sort of 10 years ago, kind of as values have kind of improved over there. But this is what this now allows us to do, is to say, well, actually, how do we find similar opportunities? And this is kind of where our sort of new Elite Plus system can be really useful. So this was kind of good old school shop with uppers, really. It's kind of buying that low value upper parts with a view to convert that into residential and or HMO and or kind of build it to let it rather than to sell it in effect. But in the Elite Plus system, what we then have is that same calculation in effect being run for us. So what we can sort of see, if I just kind of zoom out a little bit, and in fact, what I might do is just click on one of these and just get rid of the polygons for a second. In fact, let's make that even easier to see. Let's do that. So what we can see here is what we call our shops with uppers overlay in effect. And what this is showing us then is all the buildings in the area that have got a retail unit on the ground floor. So when we did the webinar last week, Suzi talked about this thing, Class G mixed development rights, where you can take a retail unit, you can put two flats above an individual retail unit in effect. So what this is doing is saying, well, where do we see a retail unit on the ground floor? And then where do we see commercial space above it? And then what it says, well, based on there being commercial space upstairs, if we applied a sensible yield and assumed sort of a sensible ERV for that unit, which we kind of use by looking at the rates assessment, that by definition is what district value for the rent was back in 2015. Then if we then converted that for a sensible conversion cost, then what kind of profit levels would we see? And are those profit levels significant? Are they significantly more than 25% return on costs? If they are, this scheme probably stacks up, thanks very much. So what it then does is we can sort of click around the map and sort of see, well, actually this one looks like a kind of a particularly hot color there in effect. So we can see here, this particular property, I'm going to click on that title number, so it's going to bring information about that particular property in effect. So this particular property here is owned by Hatchback Limited. They've owned that since 2013. And this little pop on the right here is saying that that particular property on the overlay has some space upstairs. It's got 11,500 square feet above ground floor. That's got a rate of £2 a foot. So it's really that sort of similar kind of storagey kind of space upstairs that we looked at for the property that we bought just a few doors away. And then with a sensible conversion cost, it's saying that we could buy and convert the upper parts of that for 130 quid. And it's saying the average residential value in that area is £350 a foot in effect. That's the average. Probably said a bit more than that. Once we convert it, put a really nice specification to that, we probably said a bit more than that. But this is based off that difference of kind of £220 a foot there or thereabouts on just over 11,000 square feet. That would give us a profit of about 2.5 million quid. And that then is more than 25% return on cost in effect. So that's what that system is showing us. Down here, we'll see a bit more information about that. So we'll see this is actually the full makeup of that building. So there's clearly, some space possibly even a ground floor that might be interesting to kind of convert. We've got kind of on the ground floor, the zone A rent's about 25 quid. So that's sort of secondary. We're probably not going to get 25 quid a foot to convert and sell at £400 a foot, but actually we might get the zone B or the zone C space away. And there's 1,500 square feet of each of those and some remaining sort of retail space on the ground floor as well. So there's perhaps a scheme to be done which sort of carves off the front with some retail into the front and then some residential upstairs from that building in effect. And this is what this building looks like. It's down here. This is the building there. So you kind of got this opportunity to kind of carve the upper parts up in effect, perhaps retain some sort of retail space on the ground floor, perhaps take a bit off the back of it as well and convert that to in effect. So those are your simple sort of shop to uppers, and these kind of lots of these all over the place, kind of lots of little bits and pieces of properties that are around, and sort of the colouring, the brighter the colour, the higher the values that you can create off the back of that. So this one here has got 2,800 square feet, it's £7 a foot. So you buy and convert it for 206 quid, 350 again, sales values in the area is on average, but a bit more than that, which gives a 400 grand profit off the back of that particular property. And again, do the same thing. And what's kind of nice with a tool like this is the way you can access that off market is by saving those properties. When I click on the property itself, gives me this opportunity to add that to my workflow. That will save it into a Kanban board here where I can then download my opportunities. I can then let a campaign very quickly to those owners. And that whole process is sort of very streamlined, so we can kind of really target this stuff off market. But there is equally perhaps an opportunity for some of this stuff that's on market. And so that's then why we've got another little tool in the platform, which is under the market section, we have this little availability section here. It's actually just being rebuilt. We've got some really cool new stuff that we're going to be launching in a couple of weeks around all of this. What we can see is that there's various properties like these that are actually on the market right now. So down here, we can see this property here is on the market to let with DWD retail. And up here, what we have is 800 square feet of first floor with an average sales price of average rental level rather of £7 a foot upstairs from the rate assessment. So it's got a value and a cost to buy it and convert it about 200 quid. Sales price of 350 again. So there's 150 quid a foot on just under 2,000 square feet. There's £250,000 to profit in that particular property. So really, I suppose what I wanted to get across was really that thought process around what were the things that we knew at the time. In fact, one thing I want to show you further actually before I kind of finish this. I just want to get rid of this strategy because there's one other thing that I'm a big believer of, and we're sort of thinking about commercial conversions. Perhaps two things is that I always believe that I'm never the first person into a marketplace to go and do the scheme that we're thinking of. So if we're thinking of converting to residential, office to residential, something like that, then the chances are in that particular location, I'm very unlikely to be the first person there to go and do that. So what we have, what we should see is a planning history in the area that I'm looking at of schemes similar to the one that I'm proposing, having gone through already. So in essence, what I should be seeing is a planning history of similar applications in an area that are very similar to the things that we're looking to do ourselves. So if I just pop on this thing called the planning overlay, then what we'll see, so obviously the building that I was just running you through with this one here, in effect, this was the property. If we kind of have a look at some of these little spots around here, what we should see is perhaps something interesting around sort of this one here. So this is saying the subdivision of the ground floor retail to create 2 units, Unit A and Unit B, plus extraction system, that sort of stuff. What it's also showing is down here. So in effect, this overlay is showing me 2 things. It's showing me where do we see residential planning applications and where do we see commercial applications. And so what we're then seeing is down here, we've then got this kind of 3rd story to be added onto the existing property to provide 2 6-bedroom HMOs in Class C4 above that property as well. So actually, the fact that we've got this scheme going forward here, what I should be seeing along this street is a similar sort of history of those properties in effect. So change of use of the first floor from health spa to 2nd floor self-contained flat in C3 to then a 5-bedroom house and multiplication under C4 with a retrospective consent that was granted back in 2014. So actually, I can start to see a planning history up and down that street of similar to what I'd got in my mind at the time, in effect, which just makes me confident that the marketplace that I'm working in is the right thing for me to be bringing forward. The second thing that would also be useful, and I'm equally conscious that I want to get onto your schemes rather than talk about my own at the moment. The final thing really is around planning. So what I should be seeing, if I'm interested in those sorts of schemes, is I should see something like an HMO, so HMO planning applications going forward in that particular location. So what I can use is I can use the planning export in Nimbus here, where it says search across a certain council. This is Warwick District Council where this particular property sits, for any applications that mention HMOs, because that's what I've got in mind as the change of use for this. Alternatively, if we're thinking residential, as we may well be, is use the residential opportunities button here. So go and find what residential applications are being submitted across Warwick District Council and provide that through as an Excel file. And what this then does, it links it to the owner's details, and it links through to them what they paid and who they used as part of their design team, in effect. There we go. So I'm just going to sort of just kind of run you through what I'm looking for as part of this. So when I open up this thing here, what this is showing me, here we go. Just enable the editing here a second. So this is the application, the link to where the application is on the council's website. There's the reference number. And then here's the details of what those planning applications are talking about, in effect. So what I want to look at is I want to see what's that general kind of tone of what's happening in the area. So what I'm looking for is kind of where's there a conversion of something, so change of use of agricultural to dwelling. Well, that's kind of interesting, but not from looking sort of town centre conversions. Change of use, that's probably change of use of agricultural building, allocation 200 units there, reserve mass of 99 units. Change of use of first and second floors by 2 one-bedroom flats. Maybe that's kind of more relevant to what we're looking at. So when we kind of then look at those, then over here, so that's 60 Regent Street, that application has gone in on. There's the title number there. I can go and click on that link. That's going to show me there's the application for that particular property, saying the change of use of these 2 upper parts is going into residential at that time. What's kind of also interesting there is kind of over here it tells you the date those properties were last sold and the prices that were paid. Equally, what it's telling me is that Suki Sakon is the person that submitted that application. They're based out of Solihull, and they use Tyler Parks as their planning consultants to go and help them through that application. In effect, it's actually Amanda Stobbs at Tyler Parks that's the person that's down as the applicant's agent, in effect. So what this does is it allows us to do a few kind of interesting things. Because I suppose the final thing I want to just kind of quick touch before we move on to your own schemes is then saying, well, actually, if we've got residential application on the left-hand side of this particular spreadsheet, and actually what I might do in here is say, well, actually, if we're thinking maybe office conversions, are there any office conversions in here? Well, application for conversion of offices to 1-bedroom apartments, change use of the floors B1A offices to 6 apartments. So down here, I've got a list of all those kind of change of use from offices to residential, in effect. What I've then got is the address of those properties, got the details of the owners, and the date that these properties were bought. So if I then say, well, actually, and then just show me those properties, perhaps that changed hands in the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, or something like that. There's a list then of those active companies that are buying offices, converting them to residential. Kind of perhaps interesting, I want to go forward and try and get some funding for a scheme that I'm doing myself. But further across on the right-hand side, then we've also then got a list of the architects that they're using. So Manley Deering, or Maloney Deering rather, Neil Kennedy, etc. Ricketts Architects. In fact, Ricketts Architects was sort of webinar with me last year, actually, sort of looking at commercial conversions anyway. So kind of perhaps helpful to understand that they're doing some stuff locally too. So I think that's kind of, I'm going to stop talking now, because that was kind of, I wanted to show sort of various bits and pieces that will kind of help us understand a particular marketplace we could be working in. And I now want to go and have a chat to the audience, I think. Let's just see who we've got. So let's just see if we can get Nadia. Hi, Nadia, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, how you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you so much for that presentation. So I've got a project in Basingstoke, but I don't know if you wanted to do the search
Yeah, so-
live or
Yeah, let's go for it. Yeah, what's the address in Basingstoke?
is RG21,
Yeah,
number 8,
yeah.
Sierra Foxtrot.
Yeah, yeah. What property number is it?
So I think it's taken you there, has it? Straight away? Can't
Yep, yeah,
tell.
yeah.
Yeah. So basically it's yeah, that's it. So I'm just looking for the exact building. It's number 100, 98 to 100.
98 to 100. On the end there, is it?
Yeah, while you're doing your magic with the wonderful map, one of the concerns I've got of this building is an old, yeah, there we are, there it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, you spotted it. So
Yeah.
it's a two semi-detached houses is what
Yeah.
I'm going for.
Yeah.
My biggest concern is it's near town center and it doesn't have much parking. If you do a street view, what you see, Paul, is yeah, it's single yellow or double yellow type of thing. And
Yeah.
there's loads of estate agents around there, and they're saying because of the size of the house, it's actually a 4-bedroom and a 3-bedroom house. Family homes need parking. And if you go round on the left, there's that shared access.
About that, yeah.
Yeah, it's very dodgy parking, really. What are the likelihood? Well, how can I be creative to get A, planning permission, and B, the sellability of something like this?
Yeah, cool. Want to take over, Susie?
Sorry, say that again, Paul?
Yeah.
Susie, you want to
So-
start?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just a couple of questions. Was it a pub, or has it been
Yeah, it's
converted
shut
to
down about
residential?
6. Yeah, it's shut down as a pub about 5 years ago.
Okay, so there's no risk of, because pubs these days are quite challenging to get conversions on. So as long as you're not going to be allocated as a asset of community value or anything like
Community
that.
use, no, it's
No.
gone beyond that. The
Okay.
pre-app has been approved, so
Fine. Okay, good stuff. Okay, so I'm just looking at the back. Actually, there's nothing. There's nothing around the back at all. Is there a garden or?
there is a very tiny, like a smoker's courtyard. It's not a garden in that sense, but it does have a couple of houses, and that's where those cars are in Hadley Place. You see.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. Got you. So
yeah,
I guess kind of, yeah. So if the advice is that you're not going to get, I mean, first of all, you want to look at the planning, don't you? And second, the saleability, and they're both as important as the other. So if you're just not going to get parking anywhere, obviously there's other ways you get parking, but I would suggest for family homes, they're not something that would sell the house. So, if it's flats, I sometimes say, is there a local authority car park that you can get an annual voucher scheme for that, won't cost very much, but actually you can get an annual pass to it, and then that's kind of included in the price kind of thing. But for houses, that's just not going to work.
No, and Susie, sorry to interrupt. I looked into the flat viability, and the architect straight away came back saying it's not going to fly. And they use Nimbus maps. They said, look, everywhere around there is more about, terraced houses. If you put in a flat, it just wouldn't sell. So it's better off 2 houses. What they are saying is there is a parking spot, but it's not, I'm not sure if that's enough for 2 houses, right? You need at least 2.
My take on this, Nadia, actually is an HMO scheme rather than a flat scheme. So just put the HMO overlay on. So you've got all these, so often you find those sort of big buildings that are they're a bit too big for the size of the site they're on. It's almost the reverse of this in many ways. This is this you kind of use to say, well, actually, I'm looking along this street, I want to go and find the smallest building and make it in line with the biggest building. So I want to kind of buy one of these along here and sort of put something like this on it and make it much bigger in effect. Mm-hmm. The flip side is true for what you're looking at here. This title here is very kind of heavily developed, if you like. And so what that really lends itself to is HMOs and carving up the individual rooms, make it a 12-bed HMO or something rather than a 4-bed and a 3-bed, and then rent those out individually, will probably make you a higher return off the back of what you've got, because it's already at that kind of very heavy density kind of leverage you have to find with pubs.
Yeah, so Paul said HMO. I was going to suggest something like a care provider on a 5-year lease or something like that.
Okay, yeah, because what I didn't want to do, HMO doesn't rock my boat personally, because I still have a job. So looking after 6, 7, tenants just doesn't float my boat. So either I'd like to sell this property, flip it, or long-term lease to a commercial, like a care home or whatever, something like that.
Yeah. So you best get in touch with the local authority about that and see if there's various routes you can go down. Speak to the counsellors responsible for adult and children's social care, or speak to the housing officer or whatever, and see if there's a route that way.
Okay, but otherwise, if it was to stay 2 houses, for example, or even one big house, parking situation, have you guys come across it, and how do you I guess permit could be part of the selling proposition? Is that one way to skin the cat?
I mean, you could certainly use part of, so you'd have to look at whether you could use part of the property for parking. Whether there's, you may have to look at demolishing a part or whatever. Like if it really isn't going to sell without it, I would suggest though that you really test that assumption. I mean, I suspect that's right, but I would just test that assumption. But I definitely think that see how creative you can be with the existing footprint, and whether you can create a garage or whether you can create a other type of parking.
Okay, thank you.
A couple of really interesting comments in the chat, actually. You've seen those, Suzi, but so Andrew's saying, well, you haven't got to run the HMOs yourself. You could rent them, so you could let them off to someone wants to rent. Obviously, they'll let them all out and they'll pay you a kind of a management kind of agreement or something like that, isn't it? You can't rent, but you can put a management agreement in place and pay that way. So you could do it that way. Bikram's mentioned Article 4 in Basingstoke. We're going to have a play with that in a second, because that brings on to one of the strategies we'll talk about. Andrew also mentioned that you could create maybe an integral garage as part of that, or buy a little garage locally to provide the parking. So that might also be interesting. Obviously, you're quite close to the centre of town, so whether you need that much parking or not, I don't know. It's perhaps a conversation with the planners could be interesting as part of that. Okay. One of the things you could do as part of that is perhaps that planning export in Basingstoke for residential opportunities, and see who are those active sort of residential architects in Basingstoke. You can perhaps go and have a phone call with and see if they'll perhaps ring the local policy officer and see what the thoughts are around all of that. Bikram's mentioned this kind of Article 4 issue, which is interesting. So let me just jump into one of our other strategies over here. I'm going to get rid of the before I do, I should get rid of the titles plotted. Come on, Nimbus. Come on.
The other thing, of course, you could do with the HMO is you could just bring a manager in to manage it on your behalf.
It is.
So you wouldn't need to do it yourself.
I just personally, it might be Article 4, which might be a showstopper, right?
Well, is it? So Article 4 typically means, so this was the first thing I was going to show you, was the planning export around here. So this is going to show you all the residential planning applications across Basingstoke in effect. So if we then say, well, based off that, show me those properties that have sold in the last 3 years. Yeah. There's a list of all the planning applications now for residential developments across Basingstoke that have changed hands in the last 3 years, which means that what you've then got is you've got a list of, these are all the little local active developers across Basingstoke doing residential schemes in effect. Mm-hmm. And then over here, then you've got the sort of the agents that they're using in effect. So there's your list of the kind of the people you should be speaking to, because they'll obviously have done some schemes nearby, and therefore, KF Planning, Avison Young, maybe they're kind of quite big, maybe, but Bell Cornwell LLP, all of these people here will have reasonable connections, and of course, these are the names of the people that you might want to get in touch with as part of that to they're the ones that actually progress those schemes individually. Those kind of could be really useful just to see if you can get that planning consent.
Yeah.
The sort of the second bit that was kind of interesting me was kind of around the sort of the ratio. So that Article 4 being in place, is quite right that there is Article 4 in place here for Basingstoke. But of course, what Article 4 usually protects, doesn't mean say you can't have a change of use into an HMO. It means to say that the density of HMOs in that area needs to be below a certain threshold, because they want to stop sort of the HMOsville. We want to kind of maintain those kind of balanced communities in effect. So even though there is Article 4 in place, what you can see is that in this part of Basingstoke, there aren't that many. And so when you start then running that calculation, what this is saying here is that for that particular property that's being brought back, which is that one, there's only 2% of all the residential properties within 50 meters of that building that are HMO, compared with residential. So one in 50 properties within 50 meters of that location is an HMO, which means that actually if you wanted an HMO consent here, the chances are that density is going to be fine. And I could probably even just use measuring tools just to kind of help with that a second. So we're here in effect. That's 100 meters. Let me just shoot that to half that size. So that's going to be about 50 meters, and it's a 60 meters, near enough. So down here, we're at 1 in 50. There's just one HMO there. When we then move up to here, my guess is there's no HMOs at all within that location. Well, in fact, I can't see any. So that one's just dropped out of the search view. So actually, even though it is Article 4 as Bikram says, I think in that particular location, you're going to be okay to go forward with an application. You may well get away with that scheme. Obviously, going to get your pre-app done and make sure that is the case. But certainly I suppose if you're trying to do it in a different spot, if you're trying to do it down here, for example, that's going to be much harder. But of course, over here it would be okay. And in the case of where you are, that HMO use would seem to be fine, Franklin.
Okay.
I'm just wishing I was as quick on Nimbus as Paul is. But in terms of, if you are in Article 4 area and you get that application, then you've got a greater chance of getting a commercial value at the end of it. Especially if you get, over 6 rooms, like a sui generis or whatever, you've definitely got a better chance of getting a commercial valuation at the end of it.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
That makes sense, Nigel. That helpful.
Very much so. Yeah, Article 4, I didn't realize. I thought once he says no, you can't have an HMO. I didn't realize there were some loopholes to justify an HMO.
Yeah. And typically you end up, it's the same thing if you go from a C4. So, typically you go from C3 to C4, and that's typically PD rights unless Article 4 is in place. When you then go from sort of above your 6 units, so your 7th bedroom in effect then needs a sui generis planning use. And the Article 4 just means you kind of do the same thing typically in that kind of change from C3 to C4. And what's kind of interesting is that, so you're kind of always doing that same thing regardless of, there's Article 4 in place, you're just doing it earlier, frankly. You're doing it from 3 to 4 rather than 6 to 7 in effect. So hopefully that's useful. Let's just see, has anybody got any, is that okay, Nadia? Have you got any more questions?
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Fabulous. Well, thank you for your
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your question. I'm just going to mute you now if that's okay. Has anybody else got any further questions they would like to ask as well? And sort of failing that, what we'll suggest we'll do is perhaps go and have a sort of a play in some different locations. We'll perhaps ask the audience for locations they'd like us to go and search. So if you'd like to ask a question, bring forward a particular site you're looking at, then we'll do that. In fact, there's a couple more. So let's go and ask Ravendra. Hi, Ravendra.
Hello. Hi, Paul. Can you hear me?
How are you doing, right?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you very much. My question is not specific to a particular property, but I'm a bit interested on the commercial side. And these days, quite many banks are for sale. So I just wanted to get opinion from both of you that what is the best possible way to repurpose it for a different kind of commercial thing. I mean, upstairs, obviously, we can convert to the flats and all those things. But the ground floor, where generally the shop in the bank was, what is the most straightforward, similar kind of uses?
Yeah, totally. So what I would suggest, in fact, let's play a game. Let's see if we can find something. Let's kind of bring this to life a little bit. So we're in Basingstoke. Let's kind of stay in Basingstoke. Let's do shops with uppers, and let's go and see if any of these come back with a bank use on them. So there you go. Barclays Bank in Central Basingstoke has come back on the shops uppers overlay. So if we just click on that a second, what we should hopefully find is that this is owned by Ridger Real Estate Limited. Bought it in 2017. They're based in Dubai. What I'm hoping to see down here is there you go. So there's your bank and premises details here. So what it's saying is, the reason why Nimbus has kind of highlighted that particular property is that there's over 8,000 square feet at first, second, and whatever else floors. So first and second floors, that's what it's showing, and a bit in the basement actually as well.
Yeah.
And it's saying that there's, it's £1.90 a foot is the average price for that area. So realistically, that rent's going to be about £220 a foot, something like that, on average across that space. If you then convert 100 quid a foot, it's going to cost you 130 quid a foot to buy it and convert it, and sales value is an average of £300 a foot. So that's all fine. The reason I want to kind of bring this to life is that what I tend to do in my head when I'm sort of looking at these things is say, well, what's the sales price in an area? In this case, about 300 quid, and that's the average sale. So actually, if I'm thinking about true sales prices, albeit this is probably above shops and this sort of stuff, so perhaps isn't kind of full on brand new build kind of stuff, but typically that new build value is about 20% above the average. So in my head, sort of 360 a foot is probably a sensible sales value in that area. And they kind of use the resi comps to kind of really pin that down to the right number, but let's kind of pretend 350 a foot is about the right kind of number. 360 makes a life new. Call it 360, makes my maths easier. So then what I would do is knock a quarter off that. So that kind of allows us some money in for profit and finance costs. So that gives me 360 a foot minus 90, which is a quarter of that, gives me 270 a foot. If I'm converting for £100, I've got kind of 170 a foot left over to buy a commercial building, but still retain 25% return on cost. The reason I'm telling you all this is that what I would expect to see off the back of that is that if I've got £170 a foot to buy a building, I would expect to see a rental level of 12, 13, 14, 15 pounds a foot if it's going to be worth £170 a foot to buy it as existing use in effect. And what this is then showing me, so down here, so the upper parts of this building, Nimbus has said you convert it to resi, right? So that's what this little calculation here is saying. There's £1.5 million worth of value to do the upper parts on this. But what's also interesting is, of course, at the ground floor, Zone A rents are £41 a foot. So if I assume £41 a foot means it's 45 quid a foot rental level at least, that sort of money for the Zone A rent at the front, I'm never going to convert 45 quid a foot's worth of value. So I'm paying, 8%, 7%, something like that. I'm paying 600 quid a foot for that space. I'm not going to convert that and sell it for 350 quid a foot. I'd be mad. But if I've got £10 a foot, then I've probably got a rental level of 12 quid for that back bit of the space, which means I could buy that for 170 a foot, convert it for 270, and I've then got a sales price of 350, minimum 300 quid a foot, at 20%, 350, 360 a foot in effect. So what I know is that actually, for repurposing this building, the back half of the building could go to residential, perhaps accessed off, Caiston Walk or something like that. So this sort of back half here might go to residential, put a couple of flats under Class M. That's now switching across. That kind of runs out next month, but I can do a bit of Class MA with the new Class MA PD rights. And then at the upper parts, it then goes to residential or possibly HMO, like we said, for the pub around the corner in effect. So in my head, that repurposing would be that. And then of course, at the front of the property, I've then got what is pretty reasonable Zone A rent. So 40 quid a foot, 45 quid. So I'd take some small 1,000 square foot retail units at the front. It may even be, we've got a trick here, Suzi, as well, isn't there, in terms of whether we create more frontages at the front here in effect. So we do, so where's my Barclays? There it is. If I can, we've already got two anyway, if I could create a shop front there, perhaps even 2 units there, possibly, I could have 4 units. I can then use my class Class G PD rights to get 2 flats above each of those 4 units. I get 8 flats above that under PD, thanks very much. So in my head, what I'd be thinking is split, 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 get a consent for 4 units, go in under Class G then to get 8 flats above it. And then I've got to, and I could even go in then under Class M for the back half of this and get that into residential as well, which gives me another couple of units, or another 3 or 4 units, something like that. And then off the back of that, if I then find that I've got 8,000 feet, I probably should have a bit more than 8 units. I really have kind of probably more like 16 or something like that, kind of 500 square foot per unit, perhaps a bit, not quite 16, maybe it's kind of 12 or something like that. Then I go back in for a planning application, having established the use. I've got retail on the ground floor. I've got PD rights for 8 flats. Rather than having 8 big flats, I want 12 smaller flats. And the chance of me getting that consent, I would think, are pretty reasonable. It's then a reletting board on the outside with an active local agent, and or come on Wednesday's webinar, my brother's going to take you through how to find the got requirements list on, looking at kind of what are those active requirements in the town centre. We go and have a look at that. Let's find you an active local agent in this area. Same trick into the market section here. So this then we'll put some little spots on the map here. You can see these. So that's telling me that Goodseer Commercial, they've got a Class E unit on the market, 1,000 square feet just there to let. Down here we've got something else. What's that? That's BDT. They've got something on the market for sale, an investment sale, 300 square feet. The Coral, that's only a few doors down, isn't it? So I've got BDT, I've got Goodseer Commercial, what are they called? BDT again, another one just further up the road. So in my head, that's the solution to that. What do you think, Suzi?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. So definitely look at units to split for sure. There are slight added complication with banks where you have their strong room or their safe that you have to usually get rid of. And that can be pretty expensive. That can be like 10 grand plus to get rid of that. But if you're going to get the return on a smaller unit, because the larger units will always get a lower zone A rate. So the more you split a unit, the kind of the higher your zone A rate should be. What I always say when people are doing commercial conversions is just make sure that the units you split into are lettable, because it's really easy to split units, but it's not so easy to get units that are like in demand in the market. So what you want to be doing is looking for the sweet spot in the market where there's a lot of demand, and the local agents, how, you know, Paul's highlighted how to find them. A good local agent should be able to tell you kind of where the sweet spot of demand is in the market, you know, the size of unit, the configuration, etc., so that you can create the right type of unit to let. And don't forget with commercial units, you can pre-let them as well. So, you know, you can you don't have to wait till the works are finished. You can do an agreement to lease and then get that agreed. So it gives you a bit of a guaranteed entry into it rather than you know, doing it on spec.
One of the things that I was going to try and illustrate here, so what I've been playing around with here is trying to find, so on the information panel here, you've got the planning history. So I can see sort of 3 different addresses in effect, different sort of names for this particular building, and when applications have gone in. And really trying to understand, well, what was that basement layout and kind of what did it mean? Well, obviously we know there is a basement in this particular building. So under this bit here, we sort of said there's the basement area there, sort of 3,000 feet in the basement in effect, just over 3,500 feet. Often what you'll find, if there'd been any sort of planning application, perhaps it was an A1 unit that then went to A2 when the bank took it, whenever that was, then actually what you typically find in the planning applications, you see before and after plans and, you know, proposed and existing in effect. So I was sort of opening up these various planning applications to see, could I find a planning application that showed us the building layout as part of that. Unfortunately, all the stuff they've submitted has just been sort of the elevations and the kind of location plans, and this, so there's been no kind of actual application for the inside of the building, so I couldn't find any of those. But if they were there, that would be kind of where I'd find, just sort of through that information panel, jumping onto the portal in effect and seeing the information around all of that. Does that make sense, Raven? Does that kind of answer those questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
I'm just going to lob one more thing in there, if you don't mind, Paul.
Yeah, please.
Just Class C. Just remember Class C. So your commercial units don't need to be retail. They could be, you could set up a serviced office, or they could be, other uses, the doctors, whatever. So don't forget about that.
Yeah, so that's not actually development. It's all part of the same use, of course. So you can.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting, actually. One of the things that I'm particularly interested in at the moment is, and you'll sort of see come through onto the Elite Plus system with the strategies, is that as you're kind of looking in those areas, one of the things that I like the idea of, if you like, is saying, well, actually, what are those values on the ground floor? So so here we've got kind of most of it's shops, so 40 quid a foot, it's just the same use in effect. But kind of where do we see perhaps buildings along here that perhaps is an individual office building or something like that? So is there scope to change the use from one to the other in effect? Where do we see that kind of change of use as was going from office B1A to retail A1? Sometimes you see that kind of often people like the recruitment companies have some sort of office building in the sort of not quite centre of town, but actually the front bit of that be worth more as zone A rent rather than as sort of office space at 20 quid a foot kind of thing. Because zone A rents are 40 quid a foot. So carve the front off, create a retail unit, create an access off the side, upstairs into the office space, then worth as much as it stands. So that kind of, and of course that then is no longer development, it's all under Class E. So kind of pretty simple stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Does that make sense, Ravendra?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you both. I mean, repurposing was obviously my first preference, but I was just looking that if there is any like for like tenant, like a bank, which I can probably let it out sooner when I'm waiting for the planning and all these things. But after listening both of you, it affirms my initial thinking that repurposing will be doing the more value addition.
Well, I think the traditional route has always been to like put a restaurant in the old-fashioned bank buildings. 5 years ago, that's absolutely what you'd have done. You'd have probably found a restaurant that wants to take it, or a really nice kind of retailer that wants a bit of a quirky space. But the market has moved on from that. So I'm not saying that's impossible, but I think repurposing now is probably the best, chopping and changing is probably the best strategy now.
Well, that used to be the old kind of non-A1 use, didn't it? So it's kind of, it's an A2 used as a bank, and therefore I probably get A3 quite easily, thanks very much. There's no protected retail frontage down there. So A2 to A3 is going to be much easier than A1 to A3. But of course, that's all now gone because it's all Class E now. I don't know what that means in terms of values for restaurants and whether they're still going to pay that premium to get the non-A1 use or not. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to find out. But
yeah, probably not. They all overpaid in the day as well because they're all on big expansion drives and they've probably all had their fingers burnt. So maybe not quite so much. Yeah, especially with, well, again, watch on Wednesday because we've got brothers doing a webinar about the top requirements. So see if any of that's interesting. Thank you, Ravendra. We've probably just got time for a very quick last one. We'll just see if Vic's around. Hi, Vic. Can you hear us okay?
Yes. Hi.
How you doing?
Sorry. Yeah. I have actually a similar bank thing that I'm looking at. I'll give you the postcode. It's M21. 9AB.
9AB, yeah.
Yeah, it's 575. It's the one at the corner.
It's there, yeah. Interesting. It's not coming back on the shops uppers. So we're not talking shops uppers, I don't think. So,
it has upper.
But £11.17 a foot in Manchester. So that I think is the problem. Let's just kind of explain why it doesn't like it. Let me show you. So if we do Resi sales values, we've got £317 a foot as the sales value. And then on here, it's saying it's £11.17 is the value. So what the calculation is saying is that £11 a foot rate assessment wise means the rental level is probably 12, 13, 14 pounds a foot. If you pay 8% for that, then in effect, you're paying 165 quid a foot, in fact. If you then convert that to residential, you're in at, so that's my alarm saying, don't overrun. So you're 165 quid a foot, you're paying 100 quid a foot to convert it, you're at 265. And then what it's saying is the sales value are only 320 quid a foot. So you've got 60 quid a foot on 320, which is only just nearly 25% return on cost. It's not quite. And so it's sort of saying it's all a bit too marginal to make that That's why it's not on the sort of shop uppers strategy that was shown there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So and then obviously the one next to it has a yellow thing, and then that one, the
that
value
one would then, yeah. So that one then is saying that one's £7 a foot rather than £11 a foot, and therefore that's got 130 grand's worth of additional value in converting that one in effect.
Okay.
That makes sense. So you can see it likes these ones here, and the ones over the road, but doesn't like that one because it's all a bit too marginal. It likes the HSBC over the road as well. So it's saying that that's got 5,000 feet at £2.90 a foot. So there's £1 million in that one. It also likes the Barclays one around the corner as well. So it's saying that Barclays has got 1,000 feet at first floor. That's 160 a foot. So I think there's.
Paul, that £11 a foot could have dropped though, couldn't it? Could that have dropped? Because like if all the comparables around it are different. Yeah,
it could well have done. So if we then look at the availability, let's see what that looks like. So it could have dropped. There's not a lot on the market actually around there. There's something down there which I don't think is the right stuff. To let 1,000 feet. I don't think that's necessarily the right thing. Let's see what else we can find. There's more down here, isn't there? So we're after some office space, aren't we? Take it off, that's annoying. So it could have dropped, but I suppose the simple thing is saying that where's the best bang for your buck in effect, and actually over the road's better, next door's better than the one that's there. So it's a fag packet, it's not a very good valuation, but it's sort of saying it looks a bit thin.
I would definitely just do your DD on that though, and just speak to agents and just see just see if that has dropped, because it may be that's putting people off, whereas actually you might get it for the right price.
I mean, the other thing kind of then is also like HMO use again, isn't it? So there's HMOs up and down the corner around it and this sort of stuff down here, over here, these little red spots for all the HMOs. So again, that HMO use would kind of look interesting upstairs as well. We can try the high yield.
It's Article 4 in Manchester, so it's more challenging.
Yeah. I guess same point as before though, around the kind of, how many HMOs are there within 50 meters of that location. So that's 60 meters that's showing me, and actually there's no HMOs within that location. So actually this is kind of part of the beauty of this, is that people say Article 4 is difficult. Well, yes, it is difficult, it's harder, but it's only harder in those areas where there's lots of HMOs already. So you've got some HMOs, so yes, up here, nightmare, but actually all this stuff around here, there's still an HMO marketplace. Here's an HMO, and actually the location you're talking about here, it's more than 50 meters away from these various HMOs. So it's worth considering. Certainly worth considering. Fabulous. Thank you, Vic. Is that okay? Any other questions or?
Yeah, great.
Fabulous. Thank you for your question. So let's just jump back into. So in terms of sort of conscious, we've ran through quite a lot quite quickly there. So if anybody is interested in having a go at this yourself, we have a free trial here at Nimbus that you can have a go at using the Nimbus system. We also have a number of other things that we can do to help as well. So we can do a one-to-one demonstration of the system with one of our team here to kind of take you through the key bits, looking at that commercial conversion, or indeed anything else that you're thinking of at the same time. If anybody's interested in just sign up to the Elite system or the Elite Plus system, we've got a link there for that as well. And then Suzi, just in terms of you, if people want to get in touch, got some other questions, you're going to be putting your email address into the chat. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please do. And there's a couple of free webinars on my website that people would like to look at. And you can also get some special pricing next time the Commercial Property Academy opens up if people are interested.
Fabulous. And then what I've done is just launched a poll. So if anyone would like to book a one-to-one demonstration with the team here at Nimbus, that first question's for you. If you'd like to claim your 14-day free trial of the Elite system, so you can do the same stuff that I've just been doing on the platform, that second question's for you. If you'd like to come and join us on the webinar on Wednesday at 2 o'clock, which is when my brother's going to be hosting Adam Crooks, ex-Rapley surveyor, who runs a system called the Requirement List, which will help you look at kind of that front part of kind of how do I let those and what kind of what requirements are there in a particular location to kind of let that stuff, those buildings do that. Third question's for you. If you're interested in talking to us about the Elite platform, signing up to that, or indeed the Elite Plus platform, we've got any kind of questions around all of that fourth question's for you. And if you'd like Suzi, one of her team, to get in touch with you about the Commercial Property Academy, then that fifth question's for you. Leave that running for a moment. Are there any kind of questions in the chat, Suzi, you want to kind of pick up quickly before we round up?
Yeah, I've already answered one about the Class G, which is a really nice risk development right, actually, because you can, if you split the units, you can put the flats above immediately. You don't need to wait, and there's no prior approval on that as well, which is good. You do need to comply with minimum space standards, though, as all permitted development rights do now. I think is that everything? Yeah, that's everything I can see. But yeah, if anyone's got any follow-up questions or think of something that they'd like to ask, I'd be very happy if people want to email me.
There's a few other questions in the Q&A, which unfortunately we've not had time to answer, unfortunately. Right, let me just finish those polls there. So hopefully that's all been helpful. I suppose what's left really for me now is just to say thank you, Suzi, for your time today. Thank you for the insights around all that, and of course thank you for your great webinar last week as well. That was much appreciated. I know we've all kind of learnt a lot and enjoyed it very much, and enjoyed hosting you.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And then just finally, thank you to all for watching. Hope it's been useful today. I've been Paul Davis. We've been Nimbus Maps. We'll look forward to getting to see you again soon. All the best.